What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, there's a creature smaller than your thumbnail that has solved the greatest mystery in human history? What if I told you that death, the one thing every human being fears, might not be inevitable after all? Picture this. Somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea, there's a jellyfish that literally cannot die of old age. When it gets old, sick, or injured, it doesn't die. Instead, it does something that sounds like pure magic. It reverses time. Its cells transform back into their baby state, and it becomes young again. Forever. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a fairy tale. This is happening right now, in our oceans. But that's just the beginning. There are sharks alive today that were swimming when George Washington was president. There are trees older than Christianity. There are humans walking among us right now who have lived through both world wars, the moon landing, the invention of the internet, and the rise of social media. And they're still going strong at over 110 years old. And here's where it gets really crazy. Silicon Valley billionaires are spending hundreds of millions of dollars. The brightest scientists on Earth are dedicating their lives. And cutting-edge laboratories around the world are working around the clock on one single goal: making death optional for humans. We're not talking about some distant future. We're talking about discoveries happening right now that could fundamentally change what it means to be human. Some scientists believe the first person to live 1,000 years is already alive today. Others think we're just decades away from biological immortality. But immortality comes with questions that will blow your mind. If you could live forever, would you want to? What happens to society when death becomes a choice? What happens to love, to meaning, to the very essence of human experience when time becomes infinite? Today, we're diving into the ultimate mystery, the quest for eternal life. We'll explore nature's immortal creatures, meet the humans who refuse to age, uncover the cutting-edge science that's trying to defeat death itself, and grapple with the mind-bending implications of a world where dying might become optional. And hey, if you want us to keep uncovering these reality-shattering secrets that are literally rewriting the future of humanity, make sure to smash that like button. The more support we get, the deeper we can dive into these discoveries that are changing everything we thought we knew about life, death, and what it means to be human. So buckle up, because what you're about to learn will completely shatter your understanding of mortality and might just reveal the path to human immortality. Let me start by introducing you to the most extraordinary creature on our planet, Turritopsis dohrnii, the immortal jellyfish. This tiny, translucent being, no bigger than your pinky nail, has achieved something that has eluded humanity for thousands of years: true biological immortality. But before we dive into how this works, let me paint you a picture of just how incredible this discovery is. Imagine if every time you got old, every time your body started breaking down, every time you got sick or injured, you could simply reset yourself back to being a teenager. Your wrinkles would disappear, your muscles would strengthen, your mind would sharpen, and you'd literally become young again. That's exactly what this jellyfish does, and it can do it indefinitely. The process is called transdifferentiation, and it's like biological time travel. When the immortal jellyfish faces death, whether from old age, injury, starvation, or disease, its cells begin to transform. Muscle cells turn back into stem cells. Nerve cells revert to their primitive state. The entire organism essentially melts down and rebuilds itself from scratch, emerging as a genetically identical but biologically young version of itself. Think about the implications of this for a moment. Every cell in your body has an expiration date. Every time your cells divide, they get a little older, a little more damaged. But this jellyfish has found a way to hit the reset button on cellular aging. It's like having a biological time machine built into every cell of its body. The discovery of this incredible ability happened almost by accident, which makes it even more remarkable. In 1988, a German marine biology student named Christian Summer, was studying hydrozoans in Rapallo, Italy. He was keeping these jellyfish in petri dishes, observing their life cycles, when he noticed something that shouldn't have been possible. Instead of dying when they reached the end of their natural lifespan, some of his specimens were doing something unprecedented. They were aging backwards. Their bells were shrinking, their tentacles were retracting, and they were transforming back into their juvenile polyp stage. Summer initially thought he was making a mistake, that somehow young specimens had contaminated his samples. But careful observation confirmed the impossible. These jellyfish were literally reversing their own aging process. But Summer's initial discovery was just the beginning. Dr. Ferdinando Boro from the University of Salento spent years confirming and studying this phenomenon. What he found was even more extraordinary than anyone had imagined. These jellyfish didn't just reverse aging once. They could do it over and over again, potentially forever. In controlled laboratory conditions, researchers have observed individual jellyfish completing this cycle multiple times. One specimen was documented reversing its aging process 10 times in just 2 years. Mathematically speaking, if nothing kills them, no predators, no disease, no environmental disasters, these jellyfish could theoretically live forever. But the immortal jellyfish isn't nature's only answer to death. Meet the hydra, a freshwater organism that looks like a tiny underwater tree with tentacles. This remarkable creature, measuring just a few millimeters long, might be even more impressive than the immortal jellyfish because it never ages at all. Dr. Daniel Martinez from Amona College has been studying hydras for over 3 decades, and his findings are nothing short of revolutionary. Unlike most organisms, which accumulate damage over time, hydras maintain perfect cellular regeneration throughout their entire lives. Every single cell in a hydra's body is completely replaced every 20 days. But here's the crucial difference. They don't age during this process. Martinez has kept hydra colonies in his laboratory for over 4 years without observing any signs of aging whatsoever. They don't get slower, weaker, or less fertile as time passes. If anything, older hydras are just as vigorous as young ones. In fact, Martinez jokes that he has probably aged more in the time he has been studying them than the hydras themselves have. But the hydra's regenerative abilities go beyond just avoiding aging. Cut a hydra in half, and both pieces will regenerate into complete, healthy organisms within a week. Cut it into 10 pieces, and you'll have 10 new hydras. Remove its head, and it will grow a new one in just 3 days. It's like having a biological 3D printer that can reconstruct any missing part from scratch. The secret lies in the hydra's stem cells. Unlike humans, who have a limited supply of stem cells that becomes depleted over time, hydras maintain a constant population of pluripotent stem cells throughout their lives. These cells can transform into any type of cell the organism needs. Muscle cells, nerve cells, digestive cells, whatever is required for repair or regeneration. Dr. Selena Giuliano from UC Davis has been studying the molecular mechanisms behind hydra immortality. Her research has identified specific genes that control this eternal regeneration. Genes that exist in humans too, but are turned off as we age. The implications are staggering. If we could reactivate these pathways in human cells, we might be able to achieve the same kind of biological immortality. Now let's talk about lobsters, creatures that you've probably eaten, but never realized were potentially immortal. Lobsters represent a different approach to beating death. They don't reverse aging like jellyfish, and they don't avoid aging like hydras. Instead, they age backwards. As most animals get older, they become weaker, smaller, less fertile, and more vulnerable. But lobsters do the opposite. The older a lobster gets, the larger it becomes, the stronger it gets, and the more fertile it becomes. A 100-year-old lobster is not just healthier than a young lobster, it's actually more reproductively successful. This happens because lobsters produce telomerase throughout their entire lives. Telomeres are the protective caps on chromosomes that get shorter each time cells divide. In humans and most animals, telomere shortening is one of the primary causes of aging. But lobsters keep producing telomerase, which rebuilds these protective caps, essentially keeping their cells young forever. Dr. Simon Watt, a marine biologist who has studied lobster longevity, explains it like this. Imagine if every time you got a haircut, your hair grew back even thicker and stronger than before. That's essentially what's happening with lobster cells every time they divide. The oldest lobster ever caught was a massive specimen named George, estimated to be around 140 years old and weighing 20 pounds. George was caught off the coast of Newfoundland in 2008, and based on his size, marine biologists calculated that he had been alive since the 1860s. This lobster had been crawling along the ocean floor when Abraham Lincoln was president, when the first transcontinental railroad was being built, when the Civil War was raging. But here is what is truly mind-blowing. George wasn't dying of old age when he was caught. His shell was thick and healthy, his claws were strong, and by all biological measures, he was in excellent condition for a lobster of any age. The only reason lobsters die in the wild is because they get too big to successfully molt, shed their shells. They get eaten by predators, or they succumb to disease. But their underlying biology doesn't have an expiration date. Dr. Jel Atema from Boston University has been studying lobster behavior and biology for over 40 years. His research suggests that if we could protect lobsters from predators and help them through the increasingly difficult molting process, they could theoretically live for centuries, or even millennia. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these immortal creatures isn't just their longevity. It is what their existence tells us about the nature of death itself. For most of human history, we've assumed that death is inevitable, that aging is a fundamental law of biology. But these creatures prove that assumption wrong. Dr. João Pedro de Magalhães from the University of Liverpool, one of the world's leading experts on aging biology, puts it this way. These organisms are like a window into alternative biological realities. They show us that the aging and death we consider inevitable are actually just one possible outcome of evolution. There are other ways to organize a biological system, ways that lead to immortality rather than death. The study of these immortal organisms has launched an entirely new field of science called biogerontology, the biology of aging. Researchers around the world are now studying everything from immortal jellyfish to regenerating hydras to non-aging lobsters, trying to understand the fundamental mechanisms that make immortality possible. And here is where it gets really exciting. Many of the genetic pathways that control immortality in these creatures also exist in humans. We have the same stem cell regeneration systems as hydras, just turned down. We have some of the same cellular repair mechanisms as jellyfish, just less efficient. We even produce telomerase like lobsters, just not throughout our entire lives. The question isn't whether humans have the potential for immortality. It is whether we can figure out how to unlock it. And as we'll see in the next section, there are creatures on our planet that have been testing the limits of longevity for centuries, giving us clues about what extreme lifespan might look like. While some creatures have cracked the code of true immortality, others have mastered something almost as impressive: extreme longevity. These are the ancient giants of our planet, living libraries that have witnessed centuries of history unfold around them. Let me introduce you to some of the most remarkable long-lived creatures on Earth, starting with the gentle giants of the Galapagos Islands, the Galapagos tortoises. These magnificent creatures don't just live long lives. They live through history itself. Consider Harriet, a Galapagos tortoise, who became one of the most famous animals in the world. Harriet was allegedly collected by Charles Darwin himself during his voyage on the HMS Beagle in 1835. She lived until 2006, reaching the incredible age of 176 years. Let me put that in perspective for you. When Harriet was born, Andrew Jackson was the President of the United States. She lived through the entire reign of Queen Victoria, both World Wars, the Great Depression, the moon landing, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the invention of the internet, and the rise of social media. She was already 130 years old when the Wright brothers made their first flight. She was 160 when humans first walked on the moon. But Harriet wasn't unique among her species. Advaita, an Aldabra giant tortoise who lived in the Calcutta Zoo, was estimated to be around 255 years old when he died in 2006. If these estimates are correct, Advaita was born around 1750, making him a contemporary of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. Think about what these tortoises represent. They're living bridges between centuries. Advaita could have been touched by British colonial officers in the 18th century and photographed by digital cameras in the 21st century. These creatures don't just live long lives. They serve as biological time capsules, carrying within their ancient bodies the memory of eras long past. The secret to tortoise longevity lies in their extraordinary biological approach to life. Their hearts beat only 5 to 10 times per minute, compared to our 60 to 100 beats per minute. Their entire metabolism runs in slow motion, like a biological engine designed for efficiency rather than speed. Dr. Scott Davis from the University of Georgia has been studying tortoise physiology for decades. His research reveals that tortoises have developed incredible resistance to cancer, DNA repair mechanisms, and cellular maintenance systems that put human biology to shame. Their cells accumulate damage at a much slower rate than human cells, and they have redundant systems for repairing the damage that does occur. But if you think tortoises are impressive, wait until you learn about the true longevity champions of the animal kingdom, Greenland sharks. These massive predators, cruising through the frigid Arctic waters, are the longest living vertebrates on our planet, and their lifespans will absolutely blow your mind. The discovery of their extreme longevity happened relatively recently, and it revolutionized our understanding of what's possible in terms of animal lifespan. Dr. Julius Nielsen from the University of Copenhagen led a groundbreaking study that used radiocarbon dating to determine the age of Greenland sharks. What they found defied all expectations. The oldest shark they tested was at least 392 years old, but the margin of error suggested it could be as old as 512 years. This means there are Greenland sharks swimming in Arctic waters right now that were alive when Galileo was still conducting his astronomical observations, when Shakespeare was writing his greatest plays, when the first European settlers were establishing colonies in North America. Let me give you some perspective on just how ancient these creatures are. The oldest Greenland shark they found was born sometime between 1504 and 1744. At the early end of that range, this shark was born when Leonardo da Vinci was still alive, when Christopher Columbus had recently discovered the Americas, when the Renaissance was just beginning to transform European culture. These sharks grow incredibly slowly, only about 1 centimeter per year, and they don't even reach sexual maturity until they reach around 150 years old. Imagine that, a 150-year-old teenager. By the time a Greenland shark is ready to reproduce, entire human civilizations have risen and fallen. The secret to their longevity appears to be their incredibly cold environment and extremely slow metabolism. The Arctic waters where they live hover just above freezing, which slows down their biological processes to an almost supernatural degree. It's like they're living in biological suspended animation, with their life processes running in super slow motion. Dr. Sean Su from the University of Michigan, who studies the relationship between metabolism and aging, explains it this way. These sharks have essentially discovered the biological equivalent of time dilation. By slowing down their metabolism to an extreme degree, they've stretched their lifespans across multiple centuries. But extreme longevity isn't limited to massive creatures. Let me tell you about Hanako, a koi fish who became the most famous fish in history and challenged everything we thought we knew about fish lifespans. Hanako lived in a mountain pond in Japan for an incredible 226 years, from 1751 to 1977. When scientists examined her scales after her death, they could count growth rings just like tree rings, confirming her extraordinary age through multiple independent methods. To put Hanako's lifespan in historical context, she was born during the reign of Emperor Momozono in feudal Japan, lived through the entire Meiji Restoration that modernized Japan, survived World War II, and was still swimming when Star Wars premiered in theaters. She belonged to the same family for generations, passed down like a living heirloom from parent to child to grandchild. During her lifetime, Hanako witnessed Japan's transformation from a feudal society to a modern industrial power. She was already 117 years old when Commodore Perry's black ships arrived to open Japan to the west. She was 194 when the atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. She lived through Japan's entire journey from isolation to global superpower. The Koshihara family, who owned Hanako, kept detailed records of her care for generations. She lived in pristine mountain spring water, was fed a carefully controlled diet of vegetables and grains, and enjoyed a completely stress-free environment. It was like having a fish spa for over 2 centuries. But Hanako's longevity wasn't just about perfect care. Koi fish have genetic advantages that make extreme longevity possible. They have highly efficient cellular repair mechanisms, resistance to many age-related diseases, and the ability to enter periods of reduced metabolism during harsh conditions. Dr. Kazuhiro Yamamoto from Tokyo University, who studied Hanako's scales, discovered that her growth patterns revealed fascinating details about her life. During certain years, particularly during World War II, her growth rings were thinner, suggesting that even in her protected environment, she was affected by the global turmoil around her. Now let us talk about some truly ancient organisms that make even these long-lived animals seem young by comparison. In the forests of California, there are bristlecone pine trees that have been alive for over 5,000 years. These trees were already ancient when the pyramids of Egypt were being built, when Stonehenge was being erected, when the earliest human civilizations were just beginning to develop writing. The oldest known bristlecone pine, nicknamed Methuselah, is over 4,800 years old. This tree has been growing continuously since before the Bronze Age, witnessing the entire span of recorded human history. It was already 1,000 years old when Jesus was born, 2,500 years old when Columbus reached America, and 4,600 years old when humans first walked on the moon. These ancient trees survive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. High altitude, extreme temperature variations, poor soil, and minimal rainfall. Their secret is growing incredibly slowly and developing extremely dense, resin-rich wood that resists disease, insects, and decay. They're like living fortresses, built to withstand anything nature can throw at them. But perhaps the most mind-bending long-lived organisms are the clonal colonies, genetically identical organisms that reproduce by cloning themselves. In Utah, there is an aspen grove called Pondo that appears to be thousands of individual trees, but is actually a single organism. All 47,000 trees are genetically identical and share the same root system. Pondo is estimated to be at least 80,000 years old, making it one of the oldest living organisms on Earth. This single organism has been alive since before modern humans left Africa, before the last ice age, before our species developed language or agriculture. It has witnessed the entire journey of human evolution and civilization. What's extraordinary about these long-lived organisms is that they challenge our basic assumptions about the relationship between size, complexity, and lifespan. The tiny immortal jellyfish lives forever through cellular transformation. The massive Greenland shark lives for centuries through metabolic slowdown. The simple bristlecone pine survives millennia through incredibly efficient resource management. Each of these organisms has discovered a different biological strategy for extending life, proving that longevity isn't just possible, it's achievable through multiple different approaches. And as we'll see next, humans have been trying to crack these codes for thousands of years, with some remarkable individuals pushing the absolute limits of human lifespan. Now let's turn our attention to the most fascinating longevity stories of all, the humans who have pushed the absolute boundaries of what we thought possible for human lifespan. These aren't just people who lived long lives. They're biological outliers who might hold the secrets to human immortality. Let me start with the most extraordinary human being who ever lived, at least in terms of longevity. Jean Louise Comment. Jean didn't just live a long life. She lived through multiple lifetimes worth of human history, witnessing changes that no other human being has ever experienced. Jean was born on February 21, 1875, in Arles, France, and died on August 4, 1997, at the verified age of 122 years and 164 days. To understand just how remarkable this is, let me walk you through the history she personally witnessed. When Jean was born, Ulysses S. Grant was President of the United States, Queen Victoria was on the throne of Britain, and the American Civil War had ended just 10 years earlier. She was 14 years old when the Eiffel Tower was completed in 1889. She was 39 when the Wright brothers made their first flight in 1903. She was 40 when Einstein published his theory of special relativity. But that's just the beginning. Jean lived through both world wars, witnessing the transformation of warfare from horses and rifles to tanks and airplanes to nuclear weapons. She was 70 when World War II ended, 94 when humans first walked on the moon, and 121 when the internet began to change the world. Think about the technological evolution she witnessed. She was born in a world lit by candles and oil lamps, traveled in horse-drawn carriages, and communicated by handwritten letters. She died in a world of electric lights, automobiles, airplanes, television, computers, and mobile phones. She literally witnessed humanity's transformation from the pre-industrial age to the information age. But Jean's longevity wasn't just about witnessing history, she was making it. At age 85, she took up fencing. At 100, she was still riding her bicycle around Arles. At 110, she was still walking without assistance. At 120, she released a rap album. Yes, you heard that right. A 120-year-old woman made a rap record. Jean's personality was as remarkable as her longevity. She was known for her sharp wit, her love of chocolate and wine, her daily cigarettes. She didn't quit smoking until she was 117, and her remarkably positive attitude. When asked about the secret to her longevity on her 120th birthday, she said, "I dream. I think. I go over my life. I never get bored." But what made Jean's longevity scientifically fascinating wasn't just her age, it was her health. She remained mentally sharp well into her final years, maintained her sense of humor, and showed few signs of the cognitive decline that typically accompanies extreme old age. Her brain seemed to age much more slowly than her body. Dr. Michel Allard, a French gerontologist who studied Jean extensively, found that she had several genetic variants associated with longevity. She had low levels of age-related diseases, exceptional cardiovascular health for her age, and cellular mechanisms that seemed to resist the typical damage accumulation of aging. But Jean isn't alone in the realm of extreme human longevity. She's part of an elite group called supercentenarians, people who have lived past 110 years old. Currently, there are only a few hundred verified supercentenarians alive worldwide, making them rarer than many endangered species. Let me tell you about some other remarkable supercentenarians who have defied the limits of human lifespan. Sarah Noss from Pennsylvania lived to be 119 years old, dying in 1999. Born in 1880, she lived through 3 different centuries and witnessed the transformation of America from a primarily agricultural society to a global superpower. Kane Tanaka from Japan lived to be 119 years old, dying in 2022. She was born in 1903, the same year the Wright brothers made their first flight. Kane lived through the Russo-Japanese War, both world wars, Japan's transformation from a feudal society to a modern democracy, and the rise of Japan as a technological powerhouse. At age 103, she was still playing the board game Othello and solving mathematical puzzles. What's fascinating about these supercentenarians is that they don't just live longer, they often live healthier. Many remain mentally sharp, physically active, and socially engaged well into their 2nd century of life. They seem to have discovered not just longevity, but what researchers call compressed morbidity, staying healthy longer and experiencing illness and decline only in the final years of their lives. But extreme longevity isn't randomly distributed around the world. Certain regions, called blue zones, produce far more centenarians and supercentenarians than anywhere else. These areas have become natural laboratories for studying the secrets of human longevity. Let's start with Okinawa, Japan, which has the highest concentration of centenarians in the world. Okinawans don't just live longer, they live better. They have lower rates of heart disease, cancer, and dementia than virtually anywhere else on Earth. The secret seems to be a combination of diet, lifestyle, social connections, and philosophy. Okinawans practice something called hara hachi bu, eating until you re 80% full rather than completely satisfied. This practice of caloric restriction has been shown to extend lifespan in virtually every species where it has been tested. Their traditional diet is rich in vegetables, tofu, fish, and sweet potatoes with very little meat or processed food. But diet is just part of the story. Okinawans have a concept called ikigai, your reason for being, your purpose in life. Many Okinawan centenarians never fully retire. They continue to contribute to their communities, tend gardens, care for younger family members, and pursue meaningful activities well into their 100s. Dr. Bradley Wilcox, who runs the Okinawa Centenarian Study, has been studying these remarkable people for decades. He's found that Okinawan centenarians have genetic variants that protect against age-related diseases, but equally important are their social connections. They maintain strong family ties, have active social networks, and live in communities where elders are respected and valued. Another blue zone is Sardinia, Italy, specifically the mountainous regions where some of the oldest men in the world live. Unlike most places where women significantly outlive men, Sardinian men routinely live past 100. The secret seems to be their traditional lifestyle as shepherds. These men spend their lives walking miles every day through mountainous terrain, breathing clean mountain air, and eating a simple diet of goat cheese, wine, and vegetables from their gardens. They maintain close family relationships, have strong social bonds with their communities, and possess what researchers call genetic luck, protective variants that shield them from age-related diseases. Gianni Pez, an Italian researcher who first identified Sardinia as a blue zone, discovered that these communities have maintained traditional lifestyles that modern society has largely abandoned. The men continue working well into their 90s, not because they have to, but because work gives their lives meaning and purpose. But beyond lifestyle factors, modern science has revealed that supercentenarians have unique genetic advantages. Dr. Thomas Pearls, who runs the New England Centenarian Study, has been collecting DNA samples from people, over 110 for decades. What he's found challenges many of our assumptions about aging and genetics. Contrary to popular belief, supercentenarians don't necessarily have good genes. They often carry genetic variants that would normally predispose them to age-related diseases. But they also carry protective variants that counteract these risks. It's like having both the accelerator and the brake pedal pressed simultaneously, with the brakes being just a little bit stronger. Dr. Nir Barzilai at Albert Einstein College of Medicine has been studying Ashkenazi Jewish centenarians and their families. His research has identified specific genetic variants that protect against heart disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease. These protective variants are much more common in centenarians than in the general population. One of the most exciting discoveries from centenarian research is that extreme longevity often runs in families, but not in the way you might expect. Children of centenarians don't just live longer, they live healthier. They have lower rates of age-related diseases throughout their lives, not just in old age. This suggests that the genetic factors contributing to longevity aren't just about surviving to extreme old age. They read about aging more slowly throughout life. These individuals seem to have biological mechanisms that slow down the fundamental processes of aging from birth to death. But humans have been obsessed with longevity and immortality long before we understood genetics or had scientific methods to study aging. Throughout history, the quest for eternal life has driven exploration, scientific discovery, and countless myths and legends. The ancient Mesopotamians told stories of Gilgamesh searching for immortality. The ancient Chinese emperors consumed mercury and jade, believing these substances would grant eternal life. Ironically, these attempts at immortality often led to premature death from poisoning. Ponce de Leon famously searched for the Fountain of Youth in Florida, launching expeditions based on legends of miraculous waters that could restore youth and vitality. Alchemists throughout the Middle Ages and Renaissance dedicated their lives to discovering the Philosopher's Stone, which they believed could transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality. These historical quests for immortality might seem primitive compared to modern science, but they reveal something profound about human nature. We have always refused to accept death as inevitable. The dream of immortality isn't new. Only our methods of pursuing it have evolved. What's remarkable is that modern supercentenarians often share psychological traits with these ancient seekers of immortality. They possess insatiable curiosity about life, maintain strong senses of purpose well into extreme old age, and display what researchers call mortality salience, a deep appreciation for life that comes from understanding its finite nature. Dr. Dilip Jeste from UC San Diego, who studies psychological factors in aging, has found that successful aging isn't just about physical health. It's about maintaining what he calls wisdom. This includes emotional regulation, empathy, compassion, and the ability to deal with uncertainty and change. Maybe this is the real secret to human longevity, not just biological mechanisms, but psychological resilience. The ability to adapt, to find meaning, to maintain curiosity and engagement with life, even as the body ages. These supercentenarians haven't just lived longer, they've lived more fully, extracting maximum meaning and joy from every decade of their extended lives. As we'll see in our next section, modern science is now trying to combine these psychological insights with cutting-edge biotechnology to not just extend human lifespan, but to defeat aging entirely. We're entering an era where the ancient dream of immortality might finally become scientific reality. Welcome to the front lines of humanity's greatest battle, the war against aging and death itself. We're living through a scientific revolution that could fundamentally change what it means to be human, where death might transform from an inevitability into a choice, and where the first immortal humans might already be alive today. Let's start with one of the most promising approaches to defeating aging, telomere therapy. Remember those protective caps on our chromosomes I mentioned earlier? Every time your cells divide, those telomeres get a little shorter, like a cellular countdown timer ticking toward death. But what if we could reset that timer? Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn's Nobel Prize-winning discovery of telomerase, the enzyme that rebuilds telomeres, has launched an entire industry dedicated to cellular immortality. Scientists around the world are now experimenting with ways to reactivate telomerase in human cells, essentially giving our cells the same immortality mechanism that lobsters possess naturally. The results from early studies are nothing short of extraordinary. Dr. Ronald DePino at MD Anderson Cancer Center conducted groundbreaking experiments with mice engineered to have shortened telomeres, causing them to age rapidly. When his team reactivated telomerase in these prematurely aged mice, something remarkable happened. They didn't just stop aging, they began aging backwards. The mice's gray fur turned dark again, their shrunken brains expanded back to normal size, their fertility was restored, and they regained the energy and behavior of young mice. It was like watching biological time travel in action. These mice had been given a real-life fountain of youth at the cellular level. But telomeres are just one piece of the aging puzzle. Enter CRISPR, the revolutionary gene-editing technology that allows scientists to rewrite the fundamental code of life itself. CRISPR is like having molecular scissors that can cut out aging genes and paste in youth genes with unprecedented precision. Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard Medical School has become one of the most famous researchers in the anti-aging field, partly because his work with CRISPR has produced results that seem like science fiction. His team has used gene therapy to reprogram aged mouse cells back to a youthful state, essentially resetting their biological age. In one of his most famous experiments, Sinclair's team took old mice with damaged vision and used gene therapy to restore their eyesight to levels comparable to young mice. The mice didn't just regain some vision. Their optic nerves were literally regenerated, turning back the biological clock on a complex organ system. Sinclair believes that aging is essentially a loss of information at the cellular level, like a computer program that gradually corrupts over time. His approach is to restore that lost information, resetting cells back to their youthful programming. He is so confident in this approach that he has made a bold prediction. The first human to live to 1,000 years old is already alive today. But individual researchers working in university labs aren't the only ones pursuing immortality. Silicon Valley has become the epicenter of an anti-aging gold rush, with tech billionaires investing hundreds of millions of dollars in companies dedicated to defeating death. Google, as parent company Alphabet, launched Calico Labs in 2013 with a budget that reportedly exceeds $1 billion. Their mission is simple: kill death. They're using artificial intelligence to analyze massive datasets of biological information, looking for patterns and targets that could lead to anti-aging interventions. Calico's approach is different from traditional pharmaceutical research. Instead of focusing on treating specific diseases, they're trying to understand aging as a fundamental biological process that can be controlled and reversed. They're using machine learning to analyze the genomes of long-lived species, the cellular mechanisms of regeneration, and the molecular signatures of aging across different organisms. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has invested heavily in Altos Labs, a company that raised over $3 billion to focus on cellular reprogramming, essentially trying to turn adult human cells back into young cells. Altos Labs has recruited some of the world's most famous aging researchers, including Nobel Prize winners, and given them unlimited budgets to pursue the most ambitious anti-aging research imaginable. Their approach is based on the work of Dr. Shinya Yamanaka, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering how to reprogram adult cells back into embryonic-like stem cells. Altos Labs is trying to apply this technology not just to individual cells, but to entire organs and potentially whole organisms. Imagine being able to regenerate a young heart, liver, or brain inside an aging body. Peter Thiel, the PayPal co-founder and venture capitalist, has taken a different approach. He's invested in multiple anti-aging companies and has become a vocal advocate for what he calls the war on death. Thiel has funded research into parabiosis, transfusing young blood into older individuals to potentially reverse aging. The science behind parabiosis sounds like vampire fiction, but the results are real. Dr. Tony Wiscore at Stanford University has shown that when old mice are given blood transfusions from young mice, their cognitive function improves, their muscle regeneration increases, and their organs show signs of rejuvenation. The young blood appears to contain factors that can literally turn back the clock on aging tissues. Human clinical trials of young blood transfusions are already underway. Companies like Ambrosia and Alkahest have been conducting studies where older patients receive plasma from young donors. While the results are still preliminary, some patients report increased energy, improved cognitive function, and better overall health markers. But perhaps the most radical approach to defeating death is cryonics, a practice of freezing human bodies or brains after death with the hope that future technology will be able to revive them. This isn't just science fiction anymore. It's a growing industry with hundreds of people already in cryonic suspension. Alcor Life Extension Foundation, the largest cryonics company in the world, has over 200 people in cryonic storage and more than 1,300 people signed up for the procedure. Their clients include famous computer scientist Marvin Minsky, baseball legend Ted Williams, just his head, and numerous tech entrepreneurs who view cryonics as the ultimate backup plan. The theory behind cryonics is based on solid scientific principles. We know that certain organisms, like tardigrades and Arctic ground squirrels, can survive being frozen for extended periods and return to normal function. The challenge is scaling this up to complex human organs and brains without causing irreversible damage. Dr. Ralph Merkel, a pioneer in both nanotechnology and cryonics, argues that cryonics patients aren't really dead. They in a state of medical suspension that future technology should be able to reverse. He compares it to someone having a heart attack 200 years ago. In 1824, that person would be declared dead, but today, we could easily revive them with modern medical technology. Merkel believes that within 50 to 100 years, nanotechnology will advance to the point where we can repair any damage caused by the freezing process, essentially bringing cryonics patients back to life in younger, healthier bodies. It's the ultimate form of time travel, dying in 2024 and waking up in 2124. But the most exciting developments in anti-aging research might be happening in the field of artificial intelligence and biotechnology convergence. Companies like Deep Longevity and In Silico Medicine are using AI to discover new anti-aging drugs at unprecedented speed. Traditional drug discovery takes 10 to 15 years and costs billions of dollars. But AI can analyze millions of molecular compounds in hours, predicting which ones might have anti-aging effects before they're ever tested in a lab. This approach has already led to the discovery of several promising compounds that extend lifespan in laboratory animals. Dr. Alex Cheverunkov, CEO of In Silico Medicine, has used AI to identify drugs that can extend the lifespan of laboratory organisms by up to 60%. His company's AI systems can predict the biological age of individuals based on blood tests, identify biomarkers of aging, and suggest personalized interventions to slow down the aging process. Meanwhile, researchers are making breakthroughs in understanding the fundamental mechanisms of aging. The 9 hallmarks of aging: genomic instability, telomere shortening, cellular senescence, and others are being targeted by specific interventions. Companies are developing drugs that can eliminate senescence on zombie cells, restore mitochondrial function, and repair DNA damage. Dr. Aubrey de Grey, perhaps the most famous advocate for defeating aging, has proposed what he calls longevity escape velocity, the point at which medical advances extend human lifespan faster than we age. He believes we're approaching this point, where each year of medical progress will add more than a year to human lifespan. De Grey's approach, called SENS, strategies for engineered negligible senescence, involves treating aging like any other medical condition. Instead of accepting aging as inevitable, SENS aims to repair the molecular and cellular damage that accumulates over time. It's like maintaining a classic car. Instead of letting it rust and break down, you continuously repair and replace parts to keep it running forever. But all this raises profound questions that go far beyond science. If we can extend human lifespan indefinitely, should we? What would happen to society if death became optional? Would immortality be a human right? Or would it create the ultimate inequality between those who can afford eternal life and those who cannot? Dr. Bioethicist Norman Daniels from Harvard has argued that life extension could create unprecedented social stratification. Imagine a world where the wealthy literally live forever, while the poor still die of old age. The gap between rich and poor would become not just economic, but temporal, measured in centuries rather than dollars. There are also questions about resource consumption and environmental impact. If humans stop dying of old age, what happens to population growth? Would we need to limit reproduction to prevent overpopulation? Would immortal humans become so risk-averse that innovation and progress would slow down? Some philosophers argue that death gives meaning to life, that knowing our time is limited makes each moment more precious. Would immortal humans become bored, complacent, or lose their drive to achieve and create? Would art, literature, and human culture stagnate if artists had infinite time to perfect their work? But proponents of life extension argue that these concerns pale in comparison to the humanitarian crisis of aging. Every day, approximately 100,000 people die from age-related diseases worldwide. That's like having a major city disappear every single day. From this perspective, developing life extension technologies isn't just about personal immortality. It's about preventing massive human suffering. The science is advancing faster than our ability to grapple with these ethical questions. Companies are already offering genetic testing for longevity markers, personalized anti-aging interventions, and experimental treatments that could extend healthy human lifespan. We're entering an era where aging might become optional, but we haven't yet decided as a society whether that's what we want. The race against death is accelerating, and the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about adding a few years to human life. We're talking about fundamentally redefining what it means to be human. The first immortal humans might already be among us, and the decisions we make in the next few decades could determine whether humanity conquers death or is conquered by the unintended consequences of our own success. So here we stand, at the end of our incredible journey through the mysteries of immortality, and the picture that emerges is both breathtaking and terrifying in its implications. We've traveled from the depths of our oceans, where jellyfish reset their biological clocks with casual indifference to death, to the cutting-edge laboratories, where scientists are literally rewriting the code of life itself. We've met creatures that have been alive for centuries, humans who have lived through multiple lifetimes of history, and billionaires who are betting everything on the belief that death is just another problem to be solved. The evidence is overwhelming. Immortality isn't just possible, it's already happening all around us. Nature solved the puzzle of eternal life millions of years ago, scattered across hundreds of different species with dozens of different approaches. The immortal jellyfish shows us that aging can be reversed. The ancient Greenland sharks prove that lifespans can stretch across centuries. The supercentenarians among us demonstrate that humans already possess much of the genetic machinery needed for extreme longevity. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery is this: we're not just passive observers of these biological miracles anymore. We're becoming active participants in rewriting the fundamental rules of life and death. For the first time in human history, we have the tools: CRISPR gene editing, drug discovery, cellular reprogramming, nanotechnology, to potentially achieve what every human civilization has dreamed of: true biological immortality. As science isn't science fiction anymore. It's happening in laboratories around the world right now. Mice are already aging backwards. Human cells are being reprogrammed to their youthful state. Billionaires are investing hundreds of billions of dollars in companies dedicated to defeating death. Some of the world's smartest people genuinely believe that the first person to live 1,000 years is already alive today. But as we stand on the brink of this incredible breakthrough, we're also facing the biggest questions in human history. What does it mean to be human if we can live forever? How will society change when death becomes a choice rather than an inevitability? What responsibilities come with the power to extend life indefinitely? Will immortality be available to everyone, or will it create the ultimate inequality between the immortal elite and the mortal masses? These aren't just philosophical questions anymore. They practical problems that we need to solve within our lifetimes. Because whether we're ready or not, the age of human immortality is approaching faster than most people realize. Maybe the real secret we've learned today isn't about avoiding death at all. Maybe it's about what we can learn from nature's immortals and humanity's longest-lived individuals. That life is about continuous growth, adaptation, and contribution. The jellyfish doesn't just reset its age. It continues exploring its environment with the curiosity of youth. The 400-year-old Greenland sharks don't just survive. They remain active predators, essential parts of their ecosystem. The supercentenarians don't just live long. They maintain their sense of purpose, their relationships, and their engagement with the world around them. Perhaps true immortality isn't just about the number of years we live, but about how fully we live each of those years. Whether we have 80 years or 800 years or 8,000 years, the fundamental question remains the same. What will we do with the time we have? How will we grow? How will we contribute? How will we love? The quest for immortality is really the quest to understand life itself, not just how to extend it, but how to make it meaningful, how to fill it with purpose, how to use it to make the world better for everyone who comes after us. And that journey, whether it leads to 122 years, like Jean-Louis' comment, or to true biological immortality, like the jellyfish, is the greatest adventure in the history of our species. We're not just trying to live forever. We're trying to discover what forever even means. If this mind-bending exploration of life, death, and everything in between has blown your mind like it has mine, make sure to absolutely smash that like button. Seriously, the algorithm gods demand sacrifice, and your likes fuel our ability to dive even deeper into these reality-shattering discoveries that are literally reshaping the future of humanity. And hey, if you want to be part of this incredible journey, as we uncover more secrets that could change everything, from the mysteries of consciousness to the possibility of life on other planets to the technologies that might make us a spacefaring civilization, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because trust me, the discoveries we're covering are getting more incredible every single day. Who knows? Maybe the next video we make will be about the breakthrough that makes death optional. Maybe it'll be about the first human to live 200 years. Maybe it'll be about technologies so advanced, they'll seem like magic. Until then, remember this. You're living through the most extraordinary time in human history. You're witnessing discoveries that our ancestors could never have imagined. You're part of the generation that might solve the greatest mystery of all, the mystery of mortality itself. Every moment you're alive, you participating in the most incredible experiment in the history of the universe. The experiment of consciousness experiencing itself, of life trying to understand its own nature, of mortality reaching toward immortality. Make it count. Because whether you live 80 years or 800 years, this moment right here, right now, is the only moment that truly belongs to you. Don't waste it.